Dabbing it wagwan to everyone tonight as we as we're here for the round 4 of the RWB 2021 GT series, covering the tier 2 footage today at Zolder. It's all live and everything. And with me covering it is it's myself, Josh, and my lovely little baby, James Kell.
Did you do that intro for a bet?
Might have been.
Right.
But yeah, welcome everyone. Just to get the kind of, house rules out of the way. If you want to see the timings as we do, there's pitbull.live. It's down in the little description bit at the bottom of the YouTube video. If you're on Twitch, you can see the link for it on stream now. It's pitbull.live. It's literally the third thing in the bottom left of the screen next to SimSock and Racing Sim Tools, who of course sponsor everything going on at RWB. Also, if you're new to watching this, welcome, and be sure to subscribe and everything, and you'll be able to see all the other races that we end up doing and covering. And of course, if you want to join join up RWB Discord. Again, links in the description. But now that all that's out of the way, James, where are we?
Oh, we're at Zolder, Josh.
Is that Zolder?
It is Zolder. This is the round 4 of RWB GT 2021 series with the GT3's. This is our tier 2 group, so the grids have been split into tier 1 and tier 2. We followed them throughout. We've done tier 1 first and tier 2 alternating, and we're back to tier 2. I think this is, I believe, the final round, if I'm correct, Josh.
I need to get back to you on that.
Yeah, I can't remember seeing any more on the agenda, but at the moment, as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen any more updates. But they've been doing really well, actually. There's been some really close competition. Looking back to the previous round last week, was it Hungaroring, I believe? Was it? Yes. And looking at the standings, so the podium positions of last week were RWB Isaac 93. Jack Camaletto in P2 and Magnus Dahlgren in P3, so that rounds out your top 3 there. In P4 we had RWB Godzilla, P5 we had Mad Al, P6 Simon Mertens, P7 we had RWB FX UK, P8 was Gixxer, or RWB Gixxer, 9 we had RWB Mike Bull, and P10 we had Emil Soblum. Some usual sort of suspects up the top. We've seen Dahlgren perform quite well in tier 2. The Mercedes locking out P1 and P2 seems pretty common these days. The Ferrari was in P3 with Dahlgren, but a few Mercedes up there, a few Ferraris, and actually to round out the top 10, there was 3 Lexus GT3 cars. So yeah, decent spread of cars. But currently at the top of the timing screens in practice is a Mr. Alex Smith, and he has been dominant in qualifying thus far. I think he's P1 in this race. I think he was P1 in the last race, and possibly even the race before. Last race he finished P13, so he has been on a very unlucky streak. I think every time we've seen him race in this thus far or heard back, he's either disconnected or had a really terrible race. So he's one to watch because usually he ends up going backwards. So we'll see if that happens again. But any more to add, Josh?
Oh, he's just a weird one, isn't he? Because he seems to have amazing pace, and he does really well in quali and practice. He can bang out the lap times, but whenever it comes to racing, he seems to be a magnet for trouble. Whether it's him causing it or him getting involved with someone else's issues, which is kind of the opposite to me because I do trash in quali, and then somehow make up a million positions in the first lap of the race. It's a tough one for him, but yeah. It's a new weekend, it's a new round, so you just got to put what's happened in the past behind you and look forward and move on.
Exactly, yeah, I'm sure he will. I mean, he's in the Mercedes, that's his car of choice, Mr. Alex Smith, so I think it should go pretty well around here. There's some big curbs, and I think the Mercedes should go quite well. I'm not sure about the Ferrari, maybe a little bit weaker around here, possibly, but we've seen Dahlgren and a few others pull up some good times out of that car, Mad Al as well, in that new Evo variant of the car with the new 2020 updates. So I'm sure they'll be able to pull some times together. Maybe see some of the RWB possibly in the Aston and be up there a little bit. I think Aston could go quite well around here. But yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. And I think this track definitely has some interesting corners to it. And well, I'm sure we'll come on to look at them a bit later on.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Marmite track for quite a lot of people. It's
yeah.
I'm not a fan of Zolder. Unless I'm in a GT4 car, but the GT3's they just as soon as they touch one of the sausage curbs, they just go flying off into orbit.
Yeah, I do agree. I have to admit the first sector is a bit meh. The last sector is pretty boring. The second sector is okay, but it's one of those tracks like last weekend. I'm not a big fan of Hungaroring. It's pretty flat, and this track again is pretty flat. So yeah.
What about this hill we're watching?
I don't know, I'm saying it's pretty flat. Sector 2 is the only place where there's some undulations, Josh. So. And that's what we like, because it makes things a bit more interesting and gives the circuit a bit more character. When you've got a flat track, it just the corners don't really link to me. I don't know. It just doesn't have as much curb appeal, I'd say.
Fair enough, James. I mean, it's just you and your stupid undulations, man. Seem a bit obsessed at times.
Oh, Alex Smith said he won last week. Yeah, I must have had the wrong. Results possibly.
I'm gonna until we confirm this. I'm gonna go ahead and take
I'm gonna say he isn't. He didn't win.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no. But
or maybe is this the current standings? Let's have a look. Events.
Well, while Alex is busy having a shit fit and James tries to calm him down a little bit. I'll run you through what happened in qualifying, and well, qualifying was, in the past we've always said that the kind of guy in P1, Alex, seems to run away with it and kind of joke about how he might be in the wrong tier, but this week, he's still on pole position this week, but he has got Jack Camaletto in P2, and there's a 3,000th second between those two on the front row. In P3 we have RWB Isaacs, with John Gixer again 200ths off in P4. In P5 we have fellow commentator Alistair Hull. Goat Friend again 300ths away in P6 from Hull. In P7 we have Magnus Dahlgren, Mike Ball in P8, Kai Banks in P9, with RWB Alwyn rounding off the top 10. And it's so close between those guys for this. It's absolutely just mental how close all of those guys are from each other. But yeah, it's just mind blowing. I think looking at it quickly now, there's less than 8 tenths from P1 to P10.
That's going to be close.
And that's a close battle between.
Yeah, especially around here as well with the slipstreams and the potential for dives as well. I've just pulled up a file, Josh, that was the correct file for the last weekend. And Alex is correct. He did win it by a significant margin. I think
Whoops.
we just whoops. Oh, we just like to bash him a little bit. But Alex is we know he's a good driver, and he was P1. I'll run you back through the top 10 because they are slightly different. P1 was Alex Smith in the Mercedes. P2 was Magnus Dahlgren in the Ferrari. P3 was RWB Nate Newcomer in the Porsche 911, so that must have gone quite well around there. P4 was Jack Camaletto. P5 was RWB Isaac 93. P6 was Gixer, RWB Gixer. P7 is Mad Al. P8 is RWB Godzilla. P9 was RWB Mike Bull, and P10 was Eugenie in the BMW. So yeah, some familiar faces again up the top, but Alex proving that he can actually get that P1 finish, and nice of him to correct us on stream. Yeah, I must have had the wrong file open. I apologise for that, but that's all been cleared up now.
Yeah, it's what you get when I've been awake for.
When you send me the wrong file.
Yeah, when I've only just woken up and send the wrong file, but
did a bit of digging there.
Well, to be fair though, it's not our fault, it's Alex's fault, because he always messes up every race. So
yeah, so we just assumed...
If anything, it's on you, Alex, sorry.
Yeah, we just assumed he didn't actually finish P1. His luck must have come true there that weekend, and he had a 30-second margin over P2 man of Magnus Dahlgren in the Ferrari, so he was cooking and bucking in the last weekend's race. So wonder if you can do the same here. I mean, he's 2/10 clear of newcomer currently in practice. You ran us through the quali results. I can't remember the delta. Was it 3,000ths, Josh? Or
yeah, it's 3,000ths between Jack Camaletto and Alex Smith.
Yeah,
which just it's mind blowing between those two.
Yeah, no, that's really close, especially for around here, because you can definitely make some mistakes on some of these big curbs, and especially through this section, getting the car turned and point and squirt sort of scenario. It's quite difficult and quite challenging, and can definitely be setup dependent to try and get the maximum out of the tire in the car. So it'll be interesting to see what these guys do in the differing chassis throughout the race, because we know some of these cars, as I say, of previous rounds, we know the Mercedes is good on the curbs, and there is quite a few of those here that are quite aggressive, and there's quite a few of the Ferrari's good in the mid to high speed stuff. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But we're coming sort of around the last corner now in Howell's Audi here. As he's just pulling over to go into the pits. So unfortunate. Would have been such a good time to get a good flying lap in, but I'm sure we'll find another car to go on board with. So yes, this is a Mercedes of RWB Isaac, who is he's always at the sharp end of the field in this tier, so you good to see what he can do around Zolder, coming onto the start-finish straight here. We come into year state, which is turn 1. It's a really late apex, and you can't really touch that throttle too early, otherwise you drive off the track, just as that BMW has done on the right. I'm going to butcher these names, but with turn 2 is Sterenbach. Bow, it's a long name. Then coming into Canal, which is turn 3 here. It's quite loose and open. This is quite a tight corner of Lucien Bianchi here. You've got to really get it turned in that runoff. As soon as you dip over that curve, there's a bit of gravel there, so you can lose a lot of time down here if you exceed track limits. And this is where the Mercedes probably exceeds on these curves here with the Klein chicane there. So it's really aggressive, and you've got to really fire it in. Coming up over the hill into Butte here, and then beyond the chicane, you've got a really tight right, left, right section. You've got to really get it stopped and sort of kill the car's speed quite a lot to get it to just turn around those corners here. Coming through Terrellman here, just over the crest. Again, the car goes a little bit light there in the rear end, and a big break into Boulderberg there, coming into Jochenricht as well. This section, so a little left right, and then the final corner is the Jackie X section here, which is another left right chicane. These names are very, very long for corners, and it makes it very, very difficult to commentate on, so we'll probably be referring to numbers for the corners throughout, just to keep it quite simple. But yeah, quite flat, a few little undulations in sector 2. A lot of patience with these cars on this track. With not having that camber to assist you in some of the corners, you've really got to wait for the front and rear end to grip up. So that's going to be one to watch. And I think turn 4 coming onto that sort of back straight before the Klein chicane, that's going to be one to watch, because if they dip that wheel in the gravel, which is very, very common because you can easily push it too hard through there, if they dip that wheel, they're going to lose so much time down that straight, and that's where people are going to get caught out, I think. And that's definitely going to be a section to watch. But yeah, it's going to be interesting for track, and it usually produces some very good racing, so we'll see what happens.
100Ps. I mean, for me, the most kind of action-packed one is at the Villeneuve chicane, which we're seeing just now with RWB Isaacs going through. You always get people kind of... It's very much a single-file line through that, but you always end up with people going 2, 3, sometimes even 4 wide if it's a bit boisterous on the first lap.
Yeah.
And even down at Boulderberg through Jochenricht, you get so many people dive bombing and going for the late braking through there. So for me, it's end of sector 2 into sector 3. That's always a fantastic section for the action, and I think we'll see a lot of people maybe going off into the gravel or the grass there. But yeah, sector 1 is quite tame.
Yeah, I mean, sector 1 sort of has quite a few floaty corners, doesn't it? I mean, coming through turn 1 now with Isaac, he has to wait so long to get on that throttle, and it's a bit of a struggle. And turn 2, the braking zone is very open. There's not many reference points in turn 2, and you've really got to use your instinct to get on that brake and have confidence that the car's going to turn in, because there is not much there to have a reference of. So it's going to be quite interesting turn 2. I think that's going to make or break some drivers and their lap times, and that's why maybe we've seen some of the guys at the front getting some better times, is being able to predict that braking zone and be able to get the nose in and the throttle on, because you can easily again push that nose on or oversteer on exit and get caught up in some grass or some gravel.
I'm currently reading Crawford's message in the chats where he said James had a point and squirt scenario with some Spain light girls.
Oh, I don't know what he's on about.
Not sure what he's on about. It's just, we keep it PG here.
Yeah.
We're not quite beyond the watershed just yet.
Yes.
Half hour to go. But yeah, it's a good track. It's definitely Marmite. It reminds me of Monza a little bit.
Yeah.
It's
like
like
big
a
stops.
Monza.
Yeah, it's got some of those big stops with the sort of tight chicanes, hasn't it? And I think that's very reminiscent of Monza. I mean, the McLarens could do quite well here if that's the case. With the good braking performance they have. I mean, those big stops will help them massively. So definitely want to watch this McLaren chassis. But yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting race for sure, and I think it will produce some good racing. Just hopefully these guys can get through that sort of first section, especially what you're saying, that second sector on lap 1 is going to be quite dicey with some of those chicanes and high curbs and tight corners. So hopefully those guys can make it through there pretty clean, and we can have ourselves a good race.
Well, we fixed the technical issues we've had for a couple past weeks. Of course, 2 weeks ago it was a bit rubbish with James and I becoming radio show hosts rather than commentators. And last week we were stuck watching the rear wing half the time of cars. However, this week we may have had a fix. So here's hoping with that. Touch some wood if you've got any around you. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some action. Yeah, again, I know I keep plugging it, but if you do want to see what we're seeing, go check out pitwall.live. And yeah, if you want to get involved, join the RWB Discord. Jeez, that's hard to say, isn't it? But
bit of a tongue twister.
It is a bit of a tongue twister, but yeah, it's good racing, it's good fun, and hopefully, from what we'll see tonight, it's a bit clean as well.
Yeah, hopefully, and I know we got stuck on who was it, Damien last time, Damien Wilk, for the majority of Brands Hatch, I believe. As much as we love Damien and watching Damien, we didn't want to be on board for the full for the 50 minutes we saw. Hopefully we could jump around a bit more and get involved with some of the other drivers on track and see what they're up to.
Well, we should be moving on to the race start in a sec, as it's now just ticked past 9:30. So hopefully we'll get right into the race. Can run you through the order of the race starts now. So as mentioned earlier, P1 is Alex Smith, followed by Jack Camaletto, RWB Isaacs, John Gixer, and Alistair Howe. And those guys are in P2 through to P5. P6 is Goatfriend, Dahlgren in P7, Mike Bull in P8, Kai Banks in P9, and RWB Alwyn in P10. Just cannot do the RWB tonight, can I? P11 is Javier Eugeni with Simon Mertens in P12 and Masatoshi Kaneko alongside him. Mad Owl is in P14, Dave Crew in P15, Casper Nielsen in P16, and Carl Lewis in P17. Kevin Shepherd is in P18 with RWB Flack lining up alongside. Dan Anderson is in P20, RWB Roberts in P21, Chris Humphries in P22, Damien Wilk in P23, FX in P24, and Josh Snyder rounding off the grid of 25 drivers. However, I just see that there's 26 drivers, so that means someone didn't qualify. So we'll find out who's in 26th. But yeah, out of the guys who qualified, that is the starting grid, with this extra driver being joined at the back, and we'll find out who it is. I have a feeling it's Denise, as I don't see him on the sheet for qualifying. But yeah, we'll see how it goes, and hopefully it's a nice clean start.
Yeah, fingers crossed, and we can see all the variation of GT3 cars lap round Zolder, which is going to be a very interesting race for, is it 80 minutes this race, I believe?
Put me on the spot here. Yeah, it is.
Full 80 minutes, obviously with one mandatory pit stop. So quick splash and dash, or put fresh tyres on. It's up to the drivers, and I'm sure you'll see many of them just opt for the quick splash and dash just to get back out on track and keep track position. with the mix of drivers that we have, we might see, well, we probably will see in 80 minutes, we still see some lapping as well of back markers. So the guys at the front are going to have to make a gap, but also maintain that throughout the race. So see what these guys can do. I know Alex has the potential to drive away in this tier, possibly. I think we said it before, Josh. Do you think he might be in the wrong tier, Mr. Smith?
Well, I don't like to out people for being in the wrong tier. But yes, he is, James. I like he's in the wrong tier. I mean, in the past couple of races we've seen him, it has been kind of it's been should he be here? That's what I'm kind of saying. Without trying to explicitly say it, but yeah, it's kind of a should he be in tier 1 or tier 2? But the differences in pace during qualifying, there's next to nothing between them. What I have noticed though is the top 3 are in the new Mercedes AMG GT3 cars. So it's I wonder, like you were saying, James, earlier, the Merc could be really strong here, especially as it seems to be set up very soft compared to the other GT3 cars, which normally rock solid. They can't usually bash through the sausage curbs. I know the Macca, for one, that thing just gets thrown off completely, especially with the Porsche as well.
Yeah,
Porsche just cannot handle curbs or bumps.
I've driven the Bentley around here, which we're actually watching currently, and it struggles with the curbs as well, especially through the big chicane at turn 5, the Klein chicane. The Mercedes seems to fare better through there, and having driven the Mercedes on track, I can tell you that the base setting is quite understeery on entry and quite oversteery on exit, especially on throttle. So they will have had to definitely do some tweaking of that car to get the performance out of it for sure. But they've clearly made it work for them, and we know it's good on curbs and tracks like this. I mean, Imola is one of the tracks I'd say is quite similar to this in style. I mean, obviously less undulation here, but Imola, it definitely provides some sort of similarities in places, especially with Variante Alta at the top section of Imola, with those big curves like this track. The Mercedes seem to be able to fly through there, so I think we should see a strong performance from the Mercedes chassis at this track, and possibly a few other cars. I think this is where we might see a bit more dominance out of Mercedes rather than the Ferrari, because the Ferrari seems to be pretty strong, as we've seen throughout the season. It seems to be usually in the top 10, along with the occasional Aston, the Lexus and McLaren, but it's usually seems to be those 2 chassis up front. So I think Mercedes might have an edge this weekend.
Well, that's just like your opinion, man. I'm a strong believer in the Lexus for this weekend and the Nissan. Those 2 Japanese powerhouses just they're absolutely rapid on the straights, and if they can nail, like with the chicanes are quite easy to defend. And you know me, James, I'm the king of defense, so I think I know what I'm on about when I'm talking about defending. But with the Lexus, with that Lexus and the Nissan, you just literally need to get round a corner, point it straight, and then you can, even if someone's got a run on you, most of the cars behind you will just fall behind, even if they're in a slipstream. You can kind of outdrive them on the straights. So yeah, I'll put my bets on a Lexus or a Nissan tonight, especially from Kai Banks as well. He's done pretty well in the past as well. So yeah, we'll find out.
Yes, I remember being on board with, is it Kai? Who was he? Oh, Godzilla on here, isn't he?
Yeah.
We were on board with him at Brands Hatch. That was, we were on board, and he was putting in a solid performance on that Nissan. I have to agree, and he definitely has that thing dialed in. Whether he can maybe pull his finger out tonight and move further up, we'll definitely have a look out for him if he's on track. But yeah, no, it's definitely going to be an interesting race. But we shall see. I've got it in the chat of Goat Friend, one driver having technical problems. We will start soon, so they are looking to start the race. We're just waiting for everyone to fall into the server and get themselves all sorted, which we are now on the start grid. So great news. We'll be watching some racing very soon. 2 minutes and 43 seconds till they start rolling under that green flag, and round that last section of the track, and we'll be underway.
Yeah, you're gonna have to talk a little bit a little bit more because I've just been told by uh, one of the RWB guys who runs the event. This is a two-part series, so we are in the final bit of this first part of the series.
Mhm.
Next week, though, is part two where everyone moves into GT4 cars. And now that should hopefully make it a bit more BTCC like. And you know me, James, I love a bit of trade and paint.
Oh yeah, rubbing is racing. Especially
It's,
those GT4s, with the less aero, more mechanical grip, you can definitely get up close and personal with the other cars around you. So less aero wash. It's going to be great to watch and definitely one to tune in for next week. I'm sure there'll be some great close racing, and those GT4 cars I think are very heavily underrated in this game. I think to watch, I think they're very good and they're very good fun to race as well.
they are good fun, and I do love. Part of me loves driving them because the racing tends to be a bit more closer, and they're less aero dependent, so you don't have to worry about the wash or anything.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's just I absolutely love it.
Which GT4 car would you go for, Josh?
If I'm going for fun, I'll stick in the Maserati. If I want to be a bit more serious, I'll go in the Macca.
Yeah.
Macca through and through.
Yeah, there's some good GT4 cars, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses, and that'll be interesting to see what these guys choose actually. Because coming from their current GT3 car, will they stick with a similar layout? I mean, will the Aston drivers go for the Aston GT4? It's going to be interesting to see who switches about and who sticks with front engine rear wheel drive, or who switches to rear engine rear wheel drive, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's no sort of Porsche layout, even though there is the Cayman, but that's still mid-engine. There is no sort of rear engine rear wheel drive, which we see some of the guys driving on the grid in the Porsche, like RWB Flak, for example, and Kaneko. So be interesting to see what they change to and what suits their driving style. And I think that's definitely going to help pan out the rest of the series as we come into the final sort of 15 seconds before the green flag.
Yeah, and for the last 30 seconds is always kind of a panic, isn't it? Because you kind of worry about if you've put enough fuel in.
Yeah.
Have you got the right tyre sets on? Should you be running these brake sets? And then before you know it, you've got 5 seconds left, and the in-game crew chief's basically screaming at you to hurry up and
Yeah. So they'll all have been planning their pit stops. Oh, it seems we have someone who hasn't fully remembered to start driving. Hopefully, Charger and the rest of the back of the pack can catch up, and we can get this race underway.
Here's hoping. So as they roll down, you can still see the red lights from the back with Charger, and that's it. Green lights as I go now. That's Charger absolutely bombing it around all these guys who kind of went on the uptake for the lights going out. But we see the Aston Martin of that looks like Denise going for the inside, very late lunge, but perfectly well stopped. Charger now having to kind of defend the inside from Roberts, but that looks like carnage up ahead, as James says right there. With Charger moving all the way through. We'll try and move on to a different camera in a second, so we can see more action. But that's turn 2 already. Collision, carnage.
I mean, to be expected, really, with that many cars going through there. There's always going to be some sort of collision or contact. But yeah, these guys trying to keep it clean. Charger doing very well to pick up some positions on the start, but yellow flags out at the Klein chicane there. So obviously there's been some more contact up ahead. Whether we can change that, hopefully we can, to have a look further up the field. But yes, some great driving on board with Mertens now in the Mercedes. That should go really well around here. But we'll hopefully follow him around, see how he's doing. I don't know who got caught up in the contact there. I haven't seen any returns to pit, so hopefully it was just some light contact with the yellow flag there at the Klein chicane. But yeah, for sure, these guys are trying to keep it clean on this first lap and let it settle in, because they've got 1 hour and 20 minutes to fight this out. You can't win the race on lap 1. You can only win the race on the last lap. So these guys have got to survive till then and think and plan ahead with their strategy. So it's all starting to fall into place now. Everything's sort of settled down. You can see that there's quite a few Mercedes up the front. with Camaletto and Isaac. I'm trying to look for Alex. Alex has fallen way down to P22. Wow.
Yep, that's typical
Alex.
Typical Alex. We predicted it, we called it, and away it's happened.
So the man in the P22 now was what should have been was the pole sitter, and yeah, he must have got caught up in that one of those incidents, I believe.
Yeah, but up ahead we've got Jack Camaletto. He's built a really nice gap of 2.3 seconds, the P2 man of Isaacs. But yeah, Isaacs is currently under pressure from Gixxer, Alistair Howell, Sjöblom, and Dahlgren. And even Kai Banks is getting into the mix as well. There's about 2 seconds separating all of them. As we see someone going off there, that looks like Nate Newcomer. No, that's Carlo Denise.
Yeah.
Are missing Aston Martin from the list from qualifying. So I wonder if he's kind of just gone, oh, whoops, not done any practice and jumped straight
in. Yeah, he looked like it was on throttle, so might have just got a bit too exuberant with the loud pedal there and sent himself around. But you know, it's one of those corners where that can happen, especially with those tall curves on that corner. Hopefully he can fight back though. He's coming back with towards that. Oh, he's understeered off a little bit there. So yeah, he'll be trying his best, I'm sure, fighting forwards. But hopefully we'll see some more of him later in the race as we're on board with Damien, who we saw a lot of at Brands Hatch for a full 50 minutes. But yeah, he seems to be quite comfortable in that Lamborghini and following another one in front. Hopefully he can keep pushing on. He's within a second of that other Lamborghini of Robert there, Robert in P17. So these guys sort of in a bunch with Newcomer separating all those Lamborghinis. Doesn't seem to be a super strong chassis around here, as we see. You know, there's only Kaneko at the front there in P12 and the Lamborghini. So they're really trying their best to make that thing perform, and it seems like the Mercedes, as we've said before, seems to be the stronger car around here.
Well, yeah, it was Masatoshi Kaneko was in P13 from qualifying, but yeah, he's the highest placed Lamborghini. It's good to see him making up a position though, and now he's, as we see from the timing, he's now challenging Javier Eugeni. But further down, following Ian Simcox, we've got a nice little train going right here with Alex Smith still trying to fight his way through. He's now in P20, and he's going to be absolutely livid that we were right, James. We told him, and you know, he's now going to have a long race ahead of him trying to make up all those positions that he's kind of thrown away.
Josh, he keeps telling us he's winning when we're not commentating, and then when we're there, we never see these performances, you know, where he's at the front. So, yeah, I mean, he still needs to prove it to us that he can pull his finger out. But
well, he's currently pulled the finger out now as he's taken P19 away from RWB Roberts along the straight. He got a superb run out of Boulderberg, but now he's already a man on a mission. But now Roberts needs to be careful because he's got Ian Simcox now chasing him down as well.
Yeah, and just because they're both in Lamborghinis does not mean they will tread lightly around each other. As we say, Robbing is racing, and they will be pushing as hard as they can to make up positions. So, it'll be interesting to see how this goes. But we're on board with Dahlgren now in the Ferrari with this leading pack. He's currently in P4 in that lovely purple liveried, purple and pink liveried Ferrari, and chasing down Gixxer of the Lexus in front, and that Mercedes of RWB Isaac, and Camaletto in P1 has a 5.5 second gap approximately to the P2 man behind. So he's really stormed away with that and left that pack behind squabbling for the final few podium positions if they can hold it together for the rest of this race.
Yeah, they're going to be battling it out all the way through. Cheeky message from Crawford saying, "Fat rip for Alex, great pace, but can never win a race." And you know, every time we watch him, he always comes back to us. He says, "Oh yeah, I've won this race." And we're like, "Oh, cool." And then we race against him, and he just can't drive, can he, James? Absolutely rubbish.
I love how this has become a slight Alex commentary.
Well, you know, he's abandoned us, but there's also a battle right now between Masatoshi Kaneko and Javier Eugeni. Eugeni, of course, having he's doing well. He's pushing forward. He's not losing too much progress, but so is Kaneko, moving from P13 to P12. But Kaneko needs to be careful because he's also got Nielsen in P13, wanting to take that position back, and you know, kind of put Kaneko back where he started.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure we'll see them fighting long into this race. On board with Damien. Flashback again to that rear view cam of Damien's Lamborghini. He's 1.6 seconds behind the Aston in front of him, and he's got a 3-second gap to Nate Newcomer in that Porsche. So he's sort of in a bit of no man's land at the moment. He's got something to chase, which is that Aston in front, which he's actually closing on, I would say, just slightly. But yeah, it's a good lap. It's a good place to be putting in some consistent lap times and building that confidence for the rest of the race, because this is definitely a rhythm track, and I think once you get in that rhythm and understand, how the car's behaving in these conditions, you can really start to lay down some quicker times, especially through some of those tighter, twisty, sort of big stop sections. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. But Rommel with the Gixxer now, he's managed to pull a little bit of a gap from Dahlgren. I think Dahlgren was possibly battling with Howell behind in that Audi, and it's definitely showing, because they're 0.3 seconds apart, and Howell is definitely hounding the back of that Ferrari, and hopefully looking for a way past to try and get onto that final podium spot, at least early on in the race. So hopefully these guys can keep it clean and stay fighting each other long into the race, as we see.
Well, Howell's definitely pressuring Dahlgren. That gap is staying less than 0.5 seconds. However, Gixxer, that gap is already built up by more than 0.3 seconds through Sector 1. He threw it away a little bit when he went through Lucien Bianchi blocked. But yeah, he just needs to get that rhythm, keep it going, and just rely on Howell pressuring Dahlgren to slow them up. Isaac's also, he's kind of in a little sandwich as well. He's trying to catch up to Howell, but he's also needing to be careful with Sjöblom behind, he's taken no prisoners whatsoever. Sjöblom he's always pretty rapid, and he always likes to go for the moves, doesn't he, James?
Yeah, definitely. He's not afraid of sending it down the inside of someone and making that move, and he usually pulls it off. And we're seeing that sort of top section break up into sort of pairs. Really, we've seen, Isaac was sort of battling Sjöblom in the Lexus. So I think we're going to see that throughout the race, as we see a pair of RWB Flack and RWB Roberts here battling. Again, Porsche versus Lamborghini. It's great to see these chassis slightly different strengths and weaknesses battling on track, as we see RWB Robert getting very close to the back of that Porsche, almost giving him a little nudge. But as we commented on in practice before the race, that lovely livery of that Porsche is really up your street, Josh. I think you can see RWB Flat pit. That's very, very early pit stop.
Very early pit, but it's not unusual from what we've seen, James, for the Porsches to go for early pit stops or the very strange alternative strategy. I mean, we've seen Olivier Curtin in the Porsche in Tier 1 do some very, very questionable, well, not questionable, but very alternative pit stop strategies. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's unusual for the Porsches. They always seem to kind of go for the weirder strategy.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you.
But yeah, we've seen Mike Bull also pit very early. I don't know if he pitted for damage, but he was in that Lexus, and he was high up, from what I remember. He was up the order. I'm just trying to find it. He was in P8, so he's currently dropped down to P25. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. He could, go out. He's got a lot of clean air now, and just set lap after lap after lap.
Exactly, and I think it'd be interesting to see how RWB Flack does with this early stop, whether that'll pay off for him. Because we've seen, as you said, Olivier Curtin in Tier 1 in that Porsche pull out some very strange sort of strategy calls, which really paid off for him at Imola, yet didn't really pay off at Hungaroring at the last race, because I think he just left it a bit too long, as we said in the commentary. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the early pit stop fares for that Porsche, because we know it's good on tyres from the previous races, and whether he can make them last with that heavier fuel load. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting for sure, as we're seeing Gixxer there lapping the car already with that early pit stop. So Gixxer and Dahlgren are back together now with a 0.4 second gap, and it'd be interesting to see how that Porsche RWB Flack affects this top grid, sort of top pack with Howell behind him currently. So it seems like Gixxer and Dahlgren have broken away a little bit, but with Camaletto just a commanding lead of 8.2 seconds currently over the P2 man.
Well, we've seen it before. We've seen the traffic kind of get in the way, and of course they don't have to move out of the way as soon as possible. They just have to let them by in a safe place, and they don't even necessarily have to let you by. They're not allowed to defend or battle you.
Yeah.
And we can see that now. Flack is just sticking to his line, and he's like, you know what, you guys just do what you need to do. And yeah, I'm just waiting for him to kind of get knocked. As we see Sjöblom, he's taking no prisoners and just wants to get past Howell, but it's not happening because, of course, sorry, he's trying to get past Isaacs, but of course Isaacs was trying to be courteous to Flack and not knock him off the track or squeeze him.
Yeah.
And Sjöblom's like, no mate, come on, he's a blue flag, just get on with it and let's shift.
Yeah, no, it was very, very courteous of RWB Flack there to sort of move over to the side and let these top runners go through. But yeah, as I say, it always makes the battling interesting, especially when you have a back marker in that sort of situation. They can really hold up packs and create opportunities for cars to overtake. So it'd be interesting to go see what happens further in this race when more of that is happening on track and more of the strategy comes into play, because usually we see the Ferraris and a few of the top boys pit sort of mid-race, usually sometimes in the first half, but closer to the middle of the race. So it'd be interesting to see what they do on strategy and whether they can, you know, make these tyres last this length of time.
It is, yeah, it is. But we've just seen in the chat from RWB Charger, or Bill Jones in the game, who he first said "fuck, fuck, fuck," which is always a good sign from a driver when they come out of nowhere and say "fuck, fuck, fuck." But yeah, unfortunately, he nearly took out half the field. But luckily, I think he only clipped a couple cars rather than everyone. But that was from technical difficulties, which, of course, you see in real-world racing. You see cars with engine failures. I mean, just look back at Red Bull 2 years ago with that horrendous relationship with Renault, which worst decision I've ever seen in my life. Like, you know, glad Cyril's gone now. Just a little F1 rant. But of course, yeah, we see cars have mechanical failures in real world. We're going to see it in the Daytona 24, no doubt, with these cars just failing or even crashing. And of course, we get it in sim racing in a slightly different format of, you know, the program crashing, video cards frying themselves, power supply units going on the fritz, steering wheels just breaking or falling out, or the USB port plugged into the wrong things. You're binding like there's just a million and one things. I mean, I remember watching the virtual 24 Hours of Le Mans this year, and there was that guy who swapped his entire sim rig mid-race. Because it failed, and yeah, no, it's just brilliant.
I wonder if that would be classed as a chassis change, because technically that would be somewhat illegal in actual racing, in some situations and series, but in iRacing it's definitely legal, and you can get away with that in some pit stops. But yeah, as you say, you know, you can always have technical difficulties at home, and that's somewhat similar to what you can have out on track. And I'm sure, like Josh has mentioned, the Daytona 24 Hours coming up is going to be really interesting to see how those cars last around there for the full 24 hours. It's not a super technical track, but it definitely pushes the cars to limits, and you're running a lot of high revs a lot of the time up on that banking section. So I'm sure these guys will be embracing their inner endurance racer and thinking for that end of the race in about an hour's time. So yeah, they'll be thinking about pit stop strategies, how to best preserve those tires, their fuel usage, you know, leaving that last few liters for that last lap so they can push and put it in that quali engine mode. So yeah, these guys will definitely be thinking about all those sorts of things, and it actually is quite a large overlap between this and the real life scenarios.
100%, James. But currently up at the front, for some reason, the director's decided that he wants to watch RWB Flack, which I'm not complaining, but it would be nice to see some battles from the auto director. So I'm just saying that now so it gets the hint and moves on, since we spoke last week. But currently we've got Jack Camaletto in P1 still, but he's got about a 4 or 5 second gap ahead of John Gixer, who's about a second ahead of Dahlgren, with Dahlgren 2 seconds ahead of Howell. But Howell is still getting hounded by RWB Isaacs and Sjöblom. And Kai Banks is, of course, catching up to Sjöblom as well, because they're all fighting each other. So that's a big battle currently right now between P4 all the way through to P7. But there is a big gap forming between Mardau currently and Nielsen. I saw it at one point go to 10 seconds. I wonder if someone went off slightly. We can see it on screen now, with Nielsen being 11.4 seconds behind Mardau. But I'm not 100% sure what's going on there. I wonder if it's just the guys in between have gone for pits, or if someone's had a whoopsie.
I think Nielsen might have been battling Eugenie and crew behind, because you can see the gaps between them is like another pack. You've got Eugenie, crew, Kaneko, and sort of newcomers chasing up to that pack, but he's got Wilk behind him, as we're seeing on board now. So yeah, I think they're breaking sort of off into sort of segments now and having their own little battles within them. So I think pretty much Nielsen's sort of stuck with Eugenie at this point. He's sort of a bit no man's land. Again, as you say, we might have seen some of the people in that area have gone for the early pit stop, as we saw RWB Flack did, and a few others. So yeah, it's definitely breaking off into segments. And Howell is sort of, again, just only has Dahlgren to chase. He has a nice consistent gap to the P5 man of Isaac behind. He just needs to focus forward and exploit the strengths of that Audi and that lovely V10 engine it has.
Well, someone who's been looking forward and doesn't seem to be looking back is Alex. He's currently moved up to P15. Last we saw him about 10 minutes ago, he was in P20 and moved up to P19, and now he's in P15 and he's hounding Damien now. So Damien, I wonder if Damien's going to let him by and just be like, "Go on, Alex, I know you're faster, just please don't hurt me, just get it over with."
We've been
so he can go and battle Newcomer, and then Newcomer will end up dropping back maybe to Damien.
Exactly. I mean, we've been discussing this sort of scenario recently in some of the RWB chats and on stream, and Alex is clearly, you know, he was P1 man, and in quali he is a quick guy, and Damien could sort of do the smart thing and let him go, not hold himself up by defending and follow Alex to try and maybe pick up some tips on the lap. But also Alex is going to be looking to go forward through Nate Newcomer in that Porsche and some of the others like Kaneko, and Damien just needs to follow him through and just stick with him, because Alex can create some opportunities for Damien that he can exploit, and that's what some of these guys need to start thinking about is, have I got a faster car behind me, and maybe I've just done a pit stop and got lots of fuel on board. I should just let him go if we've got maybe a bit of a boisterous driver behind, and that driver can create some opportunities further up the road, you know. The amount of times you see that in lobbies is it's quite apparent that it's a comfortable and simple strategy to deploy, but it's often pays off quite well. So I wonder if Damien will do that, or they'll fight tooth and nail to not let Alex pass. So we'll see. We'll keep you updated on that battle.
Well, we saw the strategy work out at Brands Hatch. For the guy who was in P4, I just, you know, all the names blur into one for me.
Yeah.
But I remember Kai Banks was fighting for P2, and the guy in P4 just kind of sat back and was like, "I'm not going to touch this." And yeah, Kai and the guy in P2 ended up colliding, and then
I think Godzilla. It was RWB Godzilla and possibly Kai Banks, and then I can't remember who's in P4.
They're the same person, James.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yes.
You see, you call him Kai Banks, RWB Godzilla on the timing screen, so that's what confused me.
But speaking of Godzilla, he's just gone into the pits along with Carl Lewis as well. Just thought I'd slot that in there. You know, nice little transition. You know I love the transitions, James.
Oh, you love a cheeky transition to something different.
Well, the person who's going to want to transition into P5 is Sjöblom, who's currently attacking the back of Isaacs, as we see now. Isaac's absolutely clobbering that curb at Klein Chicane, and that's just given Sjöblom the perfect run to go around the outside of him. On the exit of Klein Chicane, as they go now into Villeneuve Chicane, and that's now Sjöblom transitioned into P5.
Yeah, we said the Mercedes was good on the curves, but it clearly wasn't that good or good enough to take that much of a clouting on the right hander of Klein Chicane there, and that just allowed Sjöblom to just force his way through really, and it left him a door and just got it done before Villeneuve, and a really nice move really, and he's pulled a decent gap already, and I think Sjöblom has some pace in that Lexus to really start looking forwards. I think Isaac's starting to slide that Mercedes around a bit more now, and we know it on traction out the corners it can be a bit treacherous, especially on this sort of black track that we're seeing, and a bit more push understeer. So hopefully Isaac will be able to stay on the back of that Lexus, but it seems quite twitchy, that Mercedes chassis. And now with that Lexus in front, he's going to be losing some of that aero efficiency and pushing that front end a bit more and working his tyres a bit harder. So yeah, I'm sure we'll keep you updated on this battle. But as you see, you know, he's pulled another. I think it's Showroom's pulled another 2/10 on Isaac there.
Well, further back down the grid, we've got Damien Wilk now looking on the outside of Dave Crew in P14 and 15 to make a pass at Easter on the outside. But of course, if he manages to stick it, he gets the inside for Sternvacht, which, you know, that would be absolutely fantastic. But unfortunately, he doesn't. He slots back in behind Dave. Brilliant name, Dave. But yeah, Damien's still looking for it. But of course, he's compromised his line, and that's given Dave the perfect run as he goes around Lucien Bianchi block as they go around now onto the back straight, heading towards Klein Chicane. And yeah, I'm just going to take a moment and absolutely love my pronunciation.
You will remember that Alex Smith was behind Damien Wilk but a few laps ago, and Alex is now in P10. So he's been charging through that field. He's clearly showing some pace here, and whether he can keep this up and push himself up the top 10 leaderboard, we'll see. I mean, he's closed in. He's 0.1 seconds behind Eugenie in P9. Alex is, so it'll be interesting to see if we can get on board with him at some point and watch what he's doing. But he's definitely charging that field and making up for lost time.
Definitely, it's it kind of, you know, with Alex, he always says he doesn't want to be moved into tier 1, but you know, he has to give the stewards some help, you know, because you know, he has to sandbag a little bit if he doesn't want to get put up. But he's already 0.1 seconds behind Eugenie. However, someone who's not under any pressure whatsoever for now is Jack Camaletto, who's 12 seconds ahead of John Gixer in P2. And it looks like Dahlgren's actually catching up slowly to Gixer. He's catching up about 0.1 seconds a lap, 0.2 seconds a lap to Gixer. So it will be interesting to see that battle later on, but someone who's not having to worry about any battles right now is Camaletto in P1 in that Mercedes.
Yeah, it seems like that top 7 have sort of spread out a little bit now and got into their own areas. I mean, you've got you got 12 seconds to Gixer in P2, then 1.2 seconds, then 2.7 seconds. Oh, Christ, that's a big one. That's going to Klein Chicane with Eugenie and I think that's Kaneko there.
That's Kaneko, yeah.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. You don't want to see that, especially on the straight. So I wonder how that happened.
That also looks like a Mercedes in the background. And do you know what? I have a strange feeling that is Alex Smith.
And possibly he got caught up in that because he was he was 1/10. He was 10th off
Eugenie,
Eugenie possibly. So yeah, he's down to P11 now. So I think that Alex Smith has got tangled up in yet another incident. P14 now. Yeah,
falling down the order.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. I think, you know, there will be some looking at that incident afterwards to see who is at fault there. Obviously, we just caught the sort of middle of it, and we can't really say who was at fault. So definitely want to possibly have a look at after the race and see what happened. But as we see, I think that was Kaneko diving straight into the pits to make that pit stop and get his repairs done. Because I think there'll be some decent damage on that Lamborghini.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Eugenie. I'm expecting Eugenie to dive into the pits as well as Alex Smith, especially as they've not done their mandatory pit stop. So luckily they're not. There we go. We see Alex dive into the pits as well on our timing screen. But yeah, you don't want to. If you've got damage, you might as well get it out with. And there you go. There's Eugenie. All 3 of those guys involved in that collision, going into the pits, getting the mandatory pit stop out of the way, done, and kind of get the damage sorted as well, because if they'd already pitted and done a mandatory pit stop, they're effectively doing a drive-through and the repairs as well, whereas this way they're just getting the extra repair damage done. And I mean, what we've seen from Alex's pace, he's going to be really, really, well, you know, to use the not PG term, he's going to be really, really pissed off, but he's got the pace, and you know, they can't make it easy for him. I mean, he's not even supposed to be in this tier, is he, James?
Yeah, well, we'll look at Damien. He's P12 now, and Damien has just been lapping, you know, and he's picked up all those positions just because of, you know, people making mistakes, and he's been keeping it clean thus far from what we've seen. And Damien's 0.8 seconds off Crew, who is the car behind of Shepard, who we're currently on board with. So these guys are starting to bunch up. Oh, as we see, was that Crew? Actually,
looked like Roberts.
Yeah, that was possibly Roberts. Maybe have the slight difference in timing screens there. Yeah, and I cruised the car behind. Yeah, I think that was a different Lamborghini there, but he was very close to rear-ending Shepherd there in that Aston as we're on board with Eugenie in the pit stop. I'm sure this will take a while to get that car fully repaired and back out on track, but they're all in the same boat, all the guys that were caught up in that incident.
Yeah, we've essentially watched watched an entire lap, and of course they're still in the pits. We've got one guy who's leaving the pits now. That looks like Alex Smith has managed to leave the pit lane, but we've still got Eugenie, who it looked like he took the absolute brunt of that punt, if you will, into the pits. But it looks like Mike Bull has unfortunately retired. He's in the pits now, but he's 9 laps down from Dan Anderson in that 666 Mercedes in P23. But looking back now with Damien Wilk, that is Roberts behind him.
Yeah.
I can confirm that. We've got Dave Crew ahead in P11. And yeah, as we know, P10 is Kevin Shepherd up ahead. Absolutely brilliant guy, Kevin Shepherd. He's brilliant fun to race with. I'm just going to throw that out there because I feel like he doesn't get enough coverage, but he's an absolutely brilliant guy to race with. And
yeah,
you know,
I don't think
there's a lot of guys on here who kind of end up in the midfield, and I always love driving in the midfield because there's so many good battles.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think the Astons get much love actually in this series, especially from us. I think it's sort of just a good all-rounder, that Aston, that it sort of goes under the radar and seems to be a mid-pack car throughout the whole season, but produces some absolutely sensational racing. And yeah, as you say, Shepherd, not enough love probably, and deserves a bit. He seems to be quite clean in the rate of racing we've seen thus far. And we're on board with another Aston actually, with FX UK in an Aston behind as well. So yeah, it's great to see these cars doing their best, and they seem to be quite a good all-round chassis really.
Well, while you were chatting about the Astons, I've been messing about with the bots, with the auto director. So hopefully we'll see. It may change around a bit more. So apologies if it does start kind of glitching out a little bit, but hopefully we'll get to focus on more action rather than focusing on people in the pit lane or people just lapping. But luckily it has picked on Dahlgren. We've not really focused on the front battle because they've kind of just spread out, but Gixxer and Dahlgren, they've kind of bunched up together a little bit more. Dahlgren's just been lapping, knocking off the time to try and catch up to Gixxer. And they're properly close to each other.
Yeah, I mean, Dahlgren's come within a second of Gixxer now, and I think he has been closing that gap because they were about 1.6 seconds apart. As you see, actually, Damien just dive into the pits here, but yeah, they've been getting closer and closer. I think they've sort of settled down a bit now and just trying to put in those lap times. But as we've seen, we had Solheim in Tier 1 at Imola at the first round, commanding lead. But unfortunately got tangled up with some back markers, I believe, and ended up in the wall. So, anything could happen in these sorts of racing. And just because Camletto has a 12 or almost 13-second gap now, it never usually ends up that way at the end of the race. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can maintain that gap even with traffic. And now that we've got quite a few cars coming into pit, he's going to have a lot more of that to deal with. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what these guys do strategy-wise, and whether they want to bring the tanks and possibly put on a fresh set of tyres. That'd be interesting to see, but yeah, you could definitely exploit that near the end of the race. So yeah, Dahlgren just pulling another 10th on Gixxer there, so they are closing in, but it seems to be quite slowly.
It is, yeah. Also, hi Zach, welcome. Welcome to the stream, hope you enjoy it. But yeah, we're currently at Zolder, and yeah, it's the Tier 2 race of the final round of Part 1 of the 2021 GT series, and so far it's been absolutely action-packed. It's just been position changes all over the place. You see Denise with a drive-through penalty that must be from track limits, which is very easy to get here, especially at the Villeneuve chicane. The amount of times I just pick up so many track cut warnings there. It's just mad. But yeah, it's absolutely brilliant so far. We've got half the grid have pitted, and the other half still cruising around trying to go for it with Jack Camletto in P1.
RWB saying in the chat that Jack is changing tyres, apparently. So that'd be interesting to see. I mean, he's got enough time to do so if he's talking about Camletto at the front there. So yeah, I mean that'll give him definitely some performance gains and being able to use that initial sort of performance peak of the tyre. So definitely worth doing if you've got the time, especially when you're adding fuel as well. You definitely want to put as much grip into the car as you can. On with Isaac again, he's got a 3-second gap over Mad Al, and he's 5 seconds behind Soblum in P5. So yeah, these guys are definitely spaced out a bit now, and it's going to be interesting to see when they pit, because the pit window's open. I mean, it has been for quite a while, but obviously we see quite a few of the front runners seem to be later in the pit stop window than some of the middle of the road, middle of the field runners, which is always quite surprising, because sometimes you'd think they might try that early pit, as RWB Flat did, who's in P16 currently, and a few P17 currently, some of the other runners. But yeah, they always seem to go a bit longer. So whether they're more comfortable on older used tires, but they're burning off fuel and don't want to take on too much more on a used tire, it's quite interesting to see.
It is. I've just noticed that Alex Smith's final position after his pit stop fiasco is P21, and of course, I'm seeing that he's currently chasing down Simon Mertens, who's in P20. But I mean, that's a 12-second gap so far. It's a tall order.
Yeah,
ask me, and I think he's probably gonna come in and chat later, James, and just have a little rant
and berate us.
Yeah, absolutely slate us for speaking the truth about what happened to him.
Well, he's taken out a second out of Mertens at the moment, but I don't think that's going to be enough. He might be able to get midway up the top 20, maybe. Maybe I think top 10's probably optimistic at this stage, but you never know. He's got 46 minutes to do it, and anything can happen in this sort of racing.
Well, yep, we're coming up to the halfway mark in about, in about 5 minutes? No, in 6 minutes. My maths is terrible. I've been doing it all day. Well, for the past 3 hours. But I just want to point out the attention to you guys is there's a 0.6 second gap to Dahlgren, from Dahlgren to Gixxer. Last we saw about 5 minutes ago was about a 1.2 second gap. So Dahlgren is right up behind Gixxer, and he'll actually be benefiting from the slipstream on the straights, which, I mean, I never think about Zolder being a very straight track, but it really is. You've got after turn 4, that massive long straight that goes to Klein Chicane. You've then got a run from Klein Chicane to Villeneuve Chicane, from Tellenbocht all the way to Boulderberg, and then all the way along to the turn 1. So there's a lot of straights, which I think is why on a map it kind of reminds me of Monza a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to see Dahlgren actually, see some battles up at the front, as everyone seems to be spacing out a little bit from the collisions that have happened earlier on in the race. Yeah,
no, he's pulled it almost within half a second now with Gixxer, and he's definitely been fighting that Ferrari to chase that Lexus, because the Lexus is a great chassis, front engine rear wheel drive, sort of a good all-rounder, but definitely exceeds at some tracks, and it seems to be a lovely punchy car. It has a great sort of engine and throttle response. So yeah, it's good to see that Ferrari with that twin turbo V8 setup in the rear chasing him down, as very different cars, but going about things in a similar way. And hopefully they can, as he's closed within 4/10 now, I think we're going to be seeing a battle between those two anytime now, really. As we see Damien, we're on board with Damien currently. I can't really tell who he's chasing currently because of all the pit stops going on. He's behind a Ferrari of someone, possibly someone higher up, maybe Mardal.
Could be Mardal, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously Damien's made his pit stop. This could be one of the sort of top 10 runners that hasn't pitted yet. So, and it seems to be that Ferrari just seems to be pulling away from Damien a little bit. But Damien just lapping consistently, as we've seen. Saw a lot of him at Brands, and we're seeing some more of him now. And he seems to be quite comfortable in that Lamborghini chassis, just running a little wide there, maybe a tad early on the throttle, but yeah, doing a great job. And that car, I love the sound of the Lamborghini, Josh. I can't deny. It does sound mega, but I do like the Mercedes and the Bentley burbles and cracks on upshift. So.
Oh, you do? Huh, I thought you were just one of those people who loves the high-pitched whining of everything.
I usually get that from you, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, what a friend you are. But yeah, Mardau is currently a lap ahead of Damien, so Damien just needs to kind of follow him all the way around. Because it is a relatively short track, it's not very long, and the pit wall the pit lane is quite long, especially as it kind of curves out away from turn 1 and then back in again.
Yeah.
To avoid people from crashing off at turn 1 into people leaving the pit lane. It is a relatively long pit lane compared to the track. So that's why we're kind of seeing Damien getting lapped by Mardau, even though there's, 6 positions between them.
Yeah, I think as well the pit exit's quite tricky at this track, because it comes out at turn 2, but just before the apex, and you obviously got to stay to the right of that solid white line, because you can't break that coming out the pits, really. And it sort of forces you to the apex, and obviously if you've got a fast car that's committed to that apex, it's sometimes quite tricky to negotiate that when you're leaving, leaving that pit lane. So it'd be quite interesting to see what these top guys do when they pit, and who they come out alongside, because that's going to be tricky to negotiate that sort of pit exit there, and as it can push the drivers on the outside out wide and onto the grass. So hopefully we see clean releases from the pits, but as you say, it is quite a long pit stop for such a short track, and it makes a big difference.
Well, currently the difference between Newcomer and Nielsen is getting smaller and smaller. That was down at about 1 second. Currently, we're seeing on the timing screen. It looks like Nielsen's currently trying to catch up to Newcomer, but I think Newcomer's kind of that Porsche just does really well, especially when it's coming out of corners. It's got that great exit speed, that initial kind of oomph to it, as it doesn't have any turbos to spool up. But yeah, we're currently watching Damien trying to chase down Kai Banks, or to help James's memory, Godzilla. And yeah, I told you the Nissan's quick, and I don't think that Audi's going to catch up.
Audi, the Lamborghini.
Yeah, it's an Audi.
Same
it's an Audi.
Yeah, I mean that Nissan's pretty quick around here, but something that someone's written in the chat, Dakuza, what happened to Gixxer and Dahlgren? What happened to Gixxer? He said Dahlgren got past, so we see Dahlgren's in P2 now, and it's got a 2-second gap. So he has made a point there. Maybe Gixxer's had a slight error, or Dahlgren's maybe forced his way through. I mean, he was 0.5 seconds ish behind Gixxer, so whether he's done a big send somewhere and forced a mistake from Gixxer, but Gixxer's in the pits now, so this is going to be interesting to see where he comes out in relation to the top 10.
And yeah, as James literally just says it, the director decides he wants to swap over to Gixxer in the pit lane. So yeah, hopefully we won't get stuck watching him in here for 30 seconds as he does his splash and dash, or even swaps tyres. But yeah, there's a lot of people coming into the pit lane now. We've got Mardau, who started in, Robert, Dan Anderson in P22 also dived into the pit lane. I have a feeling Dan Anderson may have retired, as he's currently 3 laps down from Carlo Denise in P21, which is unfortunate but not surprising after what we've seen. There's not been any massive dive bombs or anything. It just seems like racing incidents from what I've seen. No one particularly doing anything stupid during a move to cause a collision. But yeah, currently now watching Jack Camaletto, his face, as he goes around now past the pit lane entrance onto the pit straight, and yeah, it's quite interesting. Like, I don't see the point in rendering drivers in game, but it's just one of those things, I guess, that they keep in for immersion.
You get a lovely view of that carbon interior, Josh. I mean, look at that lovely carbon bucket seat there. I'm sure one of our viewers, Corford Bowen, will be obsessing over that thing, with his famous seat making ability. So yeah, I mean, it's great to see, and it gives you that level of immersion of you're inside someone's helmet now. We're inside Jack Camaletto's helmet now, getting a good view of his steering inputs and how he's driving that car. And that Mercedes seems to be behaving really well for him, and he seems to have got that setup dialed for this track. So a little bit early on the brakes just to be safe, and get a good run on the Aston in front of him, which I think possibly is Shepherd. And yeah, that's very nice of that Aston just to let Camaletto go by there and come up to the Villeneuve chicane and and get a good run at the Lexus Lexus in front, I believe. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see when Jack pits. But whereas Gix has come out in P10, so he's still within the top 10 after that pit stop, with Godzilla actually in front of him in P9. So maybe that earlier pit stop paid off for RWB Godzilla, or Kai Banks as you say, Josh.
Yeah, it is interesting that you say that. I kind of got a little lost reading the YouTube chat.
It's okay. We're on board with Nielsen now in the Nissan. Who's trying to catch up to Nate Newcomer, but these guys haven't pitted yet. Back on board with Kaneko in the Lamborghini. Again, these guys have pitted, so they're sort of in their own little battle now. They're sort of sorted themselves out, but the top 8 still haven't pitted, so it's going to be interesting to see where they come out. Crew is in the pits in the McLaren, so you expect him to drop down a little bit, and Mad Al possibly to be in the top 10. So yeah, it's going really well. It's pretty spaced out at the top though, so hopefully those gaps will close up near the end and we can have a good fight on our hands. But Camaletto seems to be pretty comfortable in P1 at the moment, trying not to put the commentator's curse on him, but as we've seen from the previous races, that is usually what happens. But RWB Charger in the chat says Jack's pitting soon, so expect him in the next few laps.
It's good to see we've got a crew chief in the YouTube chat keeping us on the straight and true. But yeah, with Camaletto, he just needs to keep it on track, because I mean he's got to keep it clean for 80 minutes, because if it could even his entire race can be over in less than a second.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's quite daunting, especially at least it's not a 12-hour or a 24-hour endurance race, but
yeah,
still that's a lot of time to keep the car clean.
Mm-hmm.
And not mess up, and I mean that's a lot of trust you have to put on other people as well.
Yeah.
To not hit you or to make a misjudgment for you or anything like that. So you just have to keep it clean and work all the way around. Just kind of make sure you are 100% sure on what you're going to do, especially when passing back markers.
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen, Alex Smith, P1 man in quali, is still in P19, and that's just the way of racing. He has the pace to be at the front, but unfortunately, he just can't. Obviously, he's been caught up in some incidents. But we see Camaletto and Dahlgren actually both dive into the pits now. With Dahlgren was 13 seconds behind at the time, so be interesting to see what these guys do. Whether Dahlgren stays on the tyres and just goes, as you say, a quick splash and dash, or whether he switches, as I believe Camaletto is changing tyres, so he will have a bit more performance in that Mercedes coming into the later stages of this race. But it's great to see them racing into the night, and we were following a crew just before in P13, and those exhausts were glowing red hot and spitting flames, and that's the beauty of racing at night. You see those glowing exhausts, the glowing brake discs coming to the big braking zones, which you see a lot of around here, the sparks flying from catching the curves of the splitters and diffusers. So it's great racing to see. But as we see, one of the Mercedes is going a bit wide there in front of Simcox. I couldn't tell who that was by the time.
So back marker vote for Simcox. So
yeah,
nothing to worry about for Ian. He just needs to kind of keep going. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a nice pack of 4 ahead of him as well. Mm-hmm. That he just needs to try and catch up to, along with RWB Flak. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when they've caught up, then they can have a nice little battle. But for now, I think everyone's kind of in that stage of I'm just going to try and follow and not make a fool of myself by going off track, like we just see Flak doing there on the side.
Yeah, that was his own choice there, or had maybe a little bit of an incident at turn 4. But yeah, that's allowed Simcox through, and as we maybe he's struggling with those tyres with the very early pit stop we saw from RWB Flak. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see. But Camaletto and Godzilla, Camaletto and Dahlgren are both out on track now, but Camaletto is leading the drivers that are pitted, whereas Dahlgren's dropped to sort of P4 in that pack of cars that have pitted. So possibly not gone Dahlgren's way and not had a good exit from the pits, possibly. But yeah, that's quite unfortunate.
Well, current number P1 man is fellow commentator Alistair Howell. He's not pitted yet. He's still going around, but in that number 2 Audi. Interesting on what his strategy is. I wonder if he's just going to keep going for as long as possible and not get caught up by blue flags. because that's kind of what we saw with Olivier Curtin when he was going long last week. He just he didn't have to get out of the way or feel pressure to move out of the way from being a blue flagged car, because it's kind of that expectation when you're a blue flagged vehicle to move out of the way. But yeah, when it's same class racing, there's no real need to move off your line.
Yeah, exactly.
And just keep driving your line.
Takuza in the chat saying looks like Godzilla didn't change tyres, so that's possibly why he's maybe had that really quick pit stop, just getting that fuel in and gone, and that's why we see Dahlgren possibly dropping back. May have put fresher tyres on, so fortunately we can't really tell from the graphics we've got who's decided to do what, but we just have to sort of go with what we've got and the lineup we have. And we've seen a few more come into the pits actually. I believe who was dropped down. Was it Gixxer that was further? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Gixxer was in P2, yeah, he's dropped behind Godzilla, it looks like, according to our timing screens.
Yeah.
But that could change at any second, because, well, we have to wait until they go through a timing gate in order for everything to be updated. But yeah, we've still got Alistair Howell, Emil Sjöblom, and Nielsen. Those three are kind of the last guys holding out before they go for the pit stop. And of course, after they've pitted, then they realise what position they actually are in. And then the real fighting ends up coming out in about 15 minutes. They tend to start fighting.
Yeah, I'm sure Dahlgren will be kicking himself and definitely looking to go forwards. Having been in P2 and now dropped back a little bit, he'll be looking to chase down Isaac and Gixxer in that Ferrari of his, which you definitely can't miss in that purple and pink livery. So yeah, it'd be good to see if he can catch back up in that mid-engine Ferrari. And looking up the field, you know, you've got Mercedes, like from P4 back, the guys who have this, you've got Mercedes, Nissan, Lexus, Mercedes. So there's lots of front rear wheel drive cars up the front there, and seems to be going quite well for them, possibly managing the tyres slightly better. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. And Crew is doing a great job in that McLaren, being in the highest McLaren out on track, possibly the only McLaren out on track. I
believe he is the only McLaren. Yeah. I'll just double check that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the only McLaren on track.
So putting in a good representation for the British outfit there, and doing us proud and that lovely baby blue McLaren. So hopefully see some more action with Crew in the future. Possibly he can catch up FX UK, possibly, but it seems unlikely at this stage. Maybe Roberts in the Lamborghini might be catching him sooner rather than he will catch FX UK. So yeah, interesting to see. And I thought the McLaren might be a decent car for round T. I mean, we know it's not great on the curves, but it's good under braking, and there are some big braking zones. As you say, it's a track similar to Monza in that scenario. Not as high as top speed, but definitely some big brakes.
Well, the brakes on that thing are absolutely fantastic. They are quite annoying, especially when you're... The Macca is just a dogfighting car, similar to the Porsche. You can hang it around the outside of other cars. You can brake so much later. But the annoying thing about the braking on the McLaren is that it has standard brakes at the high end, so you brake kind of slightly slower than other cars at the high end speeds, but then as soon as you get to the mid to low speed braking zone, the Macca just outbrakes anything. It's absolutely phenomenal, but it's really annoying because it's not a linear brake. It feels a bit kind of, it feels like it's a bit of a polynomial.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I have to agree with you there. We were quickly on board with Godzilla actually. Unfortunately, the autocam just jumped away, but Gixxer closed up 0.3 of a second to Godzilla now for that sort of P2 fight currently of the guys who've pitted. They're getting very close, and as we're saying, I wonder if that Lexus will be able to dive down on the Nissan under braking. We know they're both strong on the straights. They've got a decent power plant behind them, but it'll be interesting to see if Gixxer can get that move done, as Dakuza's been saying in the chat.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, yeah, it's one thing to catch up to someone, but it's a completely another thing to overtake. Most of the time you end up relying on them making a mistake, either blitzing the rears too much and getting a poor exit, or if they brake slightly too early, or you psych them out so they end up going offline. So yeah, it's just overtaking's it's more about the car in front than your kind of skill. You kind of have to try and psych them out a little bit. I mean, I know you, James, you love to try and psych people out of corners whenever you're racing against them. It's an annoying thing on a planet racing.
Yeah, definitely. I can try and get in people's heads in the car in front. That's what you got to do. You almost want to, make them do what you want them to do by putting your car in a position that forces their hands. So whether Gixxer can do that to Godzilla and start playing mental games with him to try and make a mistake, I'm sure we'll see. But that's all playing into Dahlgren's hands in P7 currently, because he was 9 seconds behind, but it's closed that gap to 7.8. So these guys are really slowing each other up in that fight for currently P2 of the guys who've pitted. But that's, that Ferrari's going to be chasing them down as hard as he can.
Someone joining that list of people who've pitted is now Casper Nielsen. He's currently, as we're seeing now, in the pits. So we've only got Alistair Howe and Emil Sjöblom, the last two guys, kind of holding out, trying to see how long they can go for. I wonder if they've fueled for an entire 1 hour stint, 'cause these cars can do about 65-minute stints on a tank of fuel. Some of them can do 70, like the Nissan. That thing just, it can go for, I think, about 70, 75 minutes. It's ridiculous how long that thing can go for. But yeah, I wonder if they just filled the tank and was like, right, I'm just going to keep going to the end, no matter what. And if I crash, I'll go in earlier. But other than that, no point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure these guys will have been playing that out in their heads on the start line. As we were saying earlier, they've got 2.5 minutes or so, 3 minutes to sit there and make sure they've got their as we see RWB Flack definitely trying to make some moves. Is that Alex Smith actually diving down the outside of RWB Flack into the Klein chicane? So Alex,
that was,
yeah, a nice, lovely move from Alex Smith. Just clocked that one on the stream, and he's definitely charging up. But as we're coming back to the strategy, these guys will have been sitting there on the start line trying to decide how long they're going to go for and how long they can make these, the tyres last on the fuel, and whether they're going to even switch tyres in the pit stop, because obviously that adds extra time to their pit stop. So yeah, it's interesting to see how these strategies are playing out. And obviously Howell and Sjöblom in P1 and P2 currently, of the guys who've not pitted, it'll be interesting to see where they come out amongst the field. But I'm sure they'll be thinking about pitting very soon, within the next 10 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah, it's annoying. The camera seems to really love Dave Crew at the moment. It goes away, it goes, oh yeah, I want to watch that guy, and then immediately goes, yeah, no, this is crap, I'm going to move back to Dave. But yeah, it's going well for everyone so far, despite the incidents in the first half of the session. Everyone's kind of now, they're kind of in their own groove, they're going through it. So we've not seen too many incidents in this second half. But of course, there's 25 minutes left on the clock. And I've just, thrown the curse out for everyone. So let's see what action comes out. But yeah, we were speaking about Alex making positions up earlier. He's now 10 seconds away from Ian Simcox in P16. One battle that I would like to see is, well, it's Nate's newcomer and Mad Al. They're kind of the closest together at the moment, apart from Simcox and Kaneko.
Yeah, these guys seem to have spaced out quite a bit now, and I think everyone's sort of, as you say, have gotten in their groove and just quite happy lapping and trying to chase the car in front. But it seems to be the case up and down the field. I think the only thing that's really going to possibly throw a spanner in the works is where Howell and Sjöblom come out once they've done their pit stops, and that's when we'll see some more battles possibly. But these guys seem to have sorted themselves out, and they just have to keep it clean and try and not get caught up in any back markers, because that would be the last thing they want, which we have seen occasionally in this series with some of the earlier races. Just a few little errors of back markers, because often it's quite hard to determine how generous that back marker is going to be when they see that blue flag. Are they going to desperately stick to their line, which they are completely and 100% entitled to do? Or are they going to move out the way? Are they going to lift? Because sometimes that can catch people out. I mean, if you get people lifting on straights, or when you're slipstreaming and you're not expecting it, that's when accidents can happen. So often some of these guys just prefer the back markers to stick to their line, and just, when they make that move, they just accept it and give them a little bit more room than they would normally, and then just let them go. So As you say, it's hard to determine how the back marker is going to behave, but it seems that for the majority of this race, it's been quite clean.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop the camera from flipping about all over the place. Otherwise, I'm gonna get a seizure at this rate. I think I've managed to kind of nail it now, but we've got Nate Newcomer right behind Mad Al, but Mad Al's currently behind a car on a different lap.
I think that's Howell in the Audi of P1 currently.
It is, yes. Alistair Howell's managed to get past, and of course, yeah, he's ahead. I think he's he's one lap ahead of Mad Al, but of course, Mad Al, he might be slightly faster. We don't know. He's got a fresher rubber, less fuel as well. But yeah, it's just one of those things. But yeah, Nate Newcomer's all over the back of Mad Al.
Yeah, Newcomer's definitely going to be looking for a way through on that Ferrari. Newcomer, as we've said before, Newcomer seems to be quite comfortable in that Porsche. We often see him in a BMW for, I think it's the Constructors Series, don't we? If I am correct.
He's normally in a BM.
Yeah, he's normally a BMW driver in the RWB Constructors Series, which is definitely something everyone should check out. But obviously Nate in the Porsche now, sticking with the German brands, but completely different engine configuration and layout. So it's good to see him performing in that car. But I think he's just passed Mad Al now, so he's got himself up to P8 in that Porsche and doing very well in it.
Yeah, I mean, the Porsche is completely different design philosophy. As you see, Alex just getting super aggressive on that Lexus, but the Lexus isn't even on the same lap as Alex. Alex is just pushing ahead, trying to push them forward so he can try and catch up and make some positions to make up for not so nice race he's had. And RWB Flack is just following behind, trying to catch up to Alex and hope that he can kind of pick up the scraps, I think, at this point.
Yeah,
because Alex is the man out of position.
I think that Lexus he's following currently is Gixxer, because I saw the flash of that purple and pink Ferrari of Dahlgren behind Alex, who we're following. So if Alex is trying to unlap himself on Gixxer, that's only going to go and play into the hands of Dahlgren, especially since Dahlgren's closed that gap to 2 seconds now to Gixxer. So he's really been pushing to close that gap because it was roughly about 7 seconds. So definitely some pace in that Ferrari, and whether he can use the back markers to his advantage and make that pass on that Lexus, we'll have to wait and see. But you know, that Ferrari definitely wheezes on the straight, as we've said in the past.
It's a horrible car.
That Lexus definitely a bit more punchy on the straights. So yeah, definitely have to get it done in the corners, I think.
Yeah, this auto director needs to get in the bin, as far as I'm aware, because it's just absolutely gut wrenching to be missing out on quite a lot of good action. But yeah, I'm currently playing a Battlefield trying to make it work properly, so bear with me. But yeah, it's some good racing so far. I mean, with what the auto director's been giving us, you know, the brief 0.2 second clips that it shows us, it's not too bad actually on track. A lot of the trains have closed up. But the thing is, the trains are mixed up now. They're not all on the same lap.
Yeah.
So you've got trains of 3 or 4 cars, and there'll be two pairs of people fighting each other, but those pairs won't be on the same lap.
Yeah, I mean, Howell has just pitted as well from P1 currently, so it'd be interesting to see where he comes out on the timing board, and relative to the other drivers. But Camaletto seems to have just taken that P1 of the cars that have pitted thus far away from him. So Camaletto seems to be comfortably in the lead at the moment. Just have to wait for Shawblum to pit and see where he comes out. But I think Camaletto possibly has it in the bag at the moment. Jakuza saying in the chat that this stream's a bit psychedelic at the moment, which I can definitely agree with all the jumping around. Hopefully we'll get something solved with the technical issues. But yeah, at least we're seeing some racing and not stuck with one car. We're just seeing too many. But yes, we saw it's Gixxer. Dahlgren is now 0.9 seconds behind Gixxer, and Godzilla is 1.3 seconds behind Dahlgren. And we know these guys are closing up. I think Alex Smith is in that battle as well, who's currently in P17. And Alex definitely doesn't want to give up those positions because Alex wants to go forward. And we know he has the pace to do so. So he's trying to unlap himself, I believe, and try not to get in the way of any battles. But I think, as I say, I think that's all going to play into the hands of Dahlgren and Godzilla if holding up Gixxer.
Yeah, I mean, we've also seen Alistair Howe just go into the pits as well. He's just left the pits. So when they go through the next timing gate, we'll be able to update that leaderboard on the left-hand side of your screen, so we can actually see if it's paid off for him. But it looks like it has paid off for him, for Alistair.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can see it when he goes through the next timing gate, but it looks like he's managing to stay in P3 from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that'd be a great move for him, because he seemed to be a little bit further back in that sort of top 10 battle. I think he's around P7, P6 possibly in the battle. I mean, he's 20 seconds behind Camaletto at the moment, but it's the gap to Gixxer that we really want to see, because that's ultimately going to determine how comfortable he is in that position, and whether he either just splashed and dashed and stayed on the same tyres, or put fresh set on. You know, Gixxer's 16 seconds behind Howell currently on the timing screen, so Howell's done a mega job there, going really long but getting himself out in a great position, currently P2 of the people that have pitted. So if he's done that, I wonder where Shablum will come out in that 747 Lexus.
Well, it looks like Gixxer's come out 16 seconds behind Alistair Howe, but of course Alistair Howe is then 21 seconds behind Camaletto.
Yeah.
So Jack's pace has been absolutely phenomenal. I don't think Alex could have kept up. But speaking of Alex, he's now closing up the gap to Kaneko, down to a second, which we see Gixxer going very wide,
and Dahlgren
going through. Yeah.
So Dahlgren,
James, you owe me a Coke.
Yeah. Dahlgren obviously capitalizing on that mistake of Gixxer there, which seems to maybe just lose his breaking point, or maybe he was battling with Alex Smith possibly, which I don't know how well that would go down, but he's well within his right to do so. So see what happens. But Dahlgren making that move, and currently P3 of the guys who pitted. But as we say, we're still waiting on that Lexus of the P1 man, currently Shablum to pit. Last I saw, Camaletto was around, 20-30 seconds behind that P1 man currently. 22 seconds I was seeing on the board now, so that's the gap between P1 and P2, but P1 man still has to pit, and we, as we were saying, it's a long pit lane here, so that's a lot of time out of your lap.
I mean, for a tyre change, that's 30 seconds, so I can't see Blum going for a tyre change. That just seems very mad, especially at this stage in the race. I mean, that time lost compared to the delta from his lap times when he's on new tyres and old tyres, I can't see it being more than 30 seconds. So I have a feeling he's doing a splash and dash for Emil Sjöblom, just because it doesn't make sense at this point for him to swap tyres. It doesn't, like, as long as he can drive the car straight, he's going to be, 1-2 seconds slower at worst from his best time on new tyres. So it makes no sense for him to do that. He may as well just keep driving.
Yeah, and this is definitely a track you can defend on and do it quite successfully, because there's a lot of left-right succession of corners, which makes it easier to defend, because you can just sort of run out wide and keep people behind you. So if he just does a quick splash and dash, he's got a higher chance of being in a higher finishing position rather than bolting on those new tyres. So as you say, that extra 30 seconds is not really going to benefit him in any way at this point in time. He just needs to get back out, get track position, and hold position, because I don't think he'll be going forward, but we'll see. I mean, these guys have been on, possibly done a similar situation. I mean, Diffuser was saying earlier he thinks Godzilla didn't put fresh tyres on, so is that maybe why Godzilla's struggling to catch back up to Gixxer and Dahlgren? Because I believe Dahlgren possibly put new tyres on. So I mean, Dahlgren pulling 2-second gap to Gixxer, so these guys, really fighting hard, but seems to have spaced out a bit now, and it looks like Camaletto is in control.
It really does. Like, Sjöblom, that pit lane is definitely going to be more than 30 seconds for a pit stop.
Oh yeah.
And we see that gap at 20 seconds. So he may end up be fighting Dahlgren by the time he comes out, but yeah, he's definitely not going to be in contention for P1, and I'm very doubtful of fighting Alistair in P2. I think Alistair chose the perfect time to pit, because it's just worked out perfectly for him. I mean, look, he's got a 23-second gap to Dahlgren currently, which is just... he's got a 23-second gap to P2, man.
Yeah.
But Dahlgren's got a 14-second gap to him, so he just needs to hold on for 13 minutes, and then he'll be fine. Someone who does need to hold on even more, though, is Ian Simcox, as he's desperately trying to fight RWB Roberts. Both of them are in the Audi knockoff. And yeah, Simcox is currently 0.3 seconds down from Roberts, and that gap has been sitting there for the past 2-3 minutes. Simcox is definitely just sitting behind him, and either he's going for moves and it's not paying off, or he's just waiting and biding his time for the perfect moment to strike.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. From what I've seen, Simcox seems to be a pretty clean driver. He doesn't, want to obviously wipe anyone out or make too many dodgy moves or big sends. So it looks like he'll probably be waiting for Roberts to make that mistake. And being so close, he can really capitalize on that when he does, especially being within half a second of that Lamborghini in front. But he has to be mindful that he's in that aero wash. He'll be losing a bit of front end performance, and he'll be wearing through his tires a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see how long he can hold that gap to Roberts before having to think about making a move. As we see Camletto, world of his own at the moment, just lapping and lapping. I mean, he's got such a consistent gap to Howell in the Audi. Same thing. The car behind, but he's actually closed in. He's 19 seconds now to the P1 man of Shabloom currently, who's not pitted. So he's closing in. He was about 22 seconds before. So I think that Lexus needs to come in and pit and get it over and done with, because he's just going to be losing more and more time.
I'm just currently laughing inside at Charger's joke about how.
I saw that. If you'd like to go and check out the chat in YouTube.
It's a good joke. It's good fun. But yeah, it looks like Simcox. It looks like he's dropped back a bit from Roberts, because you saw that gap is now 1.6 seconds now on our timing screens. And it looks like everyone's kind of spaced out a bit. I think the blue flagged cars coming through the traffic is kind of throwing a spanner in the works for everyone.
Yeah,
he was close, and all these trains now. Yeah, it's just big gaps between them. I think we're in the closing stages of a race now, coming up for the 11-minute mark, and I don't see much happening.
No, I think the most impressive thing to me is how long the P1 man has dragged out that Lexus on that fuel. I think the big V8 under the bonnet of that, and he's done an hour and 10 minutes on a tank, which he's doing very well for fuel economy wise. I think he's going to start running on fumes pretty soon, so he's probably going to have to start thinking about pitting. But very interesting strategy here to really drag it out to this point in the race. But is he banking on fighting in the back, of slowing people down to come out in a clean position? Possibly, but as we see, they're all pretty spaced out. I mean, Nate Newcomb has closed in on RWB Isaac a little bit. He's 0.2 seconds behind, so that's probably the closest battle we have at the moment. But everyone else seems to be one or 2 seconds apart.
Yeah, it's getting. Yeah, I wouldn't say the racing is as good as Hungary. I'd say for battles that have been happening on track, they have been absolutely phenomenal. But the quantity's been a little bit less. But saying that, we see a newcomer right up behind Isaacs in the timing screen, 0.175 seconds behind Isaacs is Nate Newcomer. So, it's not over. I'm not giving up hope on seeing a battle.
Newcomer's through on Isaac just now, and has pulled the gap. So Newcomer's got himself into P7.
Easy win.
He's still got a 9-second gap to Godzilla, so I think with 9 minutes left to go, unless he can pull a second and a bit of lap, I think Newcomer is going to be finishing about there, unless Isaac has anything to say about it and is going to come back at him in that Mercedes.
Yeah, it's going well. It's
Bloom's just coming out the pits now as we're on board. Sorry, I completely missed
that. It's good.
So I wonder where he's going to come out. He's got an Aston behind him. It's FXEK possibly, but whether that's possibly already been lapped by.
Well, we'll see in a second when they go through the timing gate.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where he's going to come out.
We should see updating in the next 5 seconds.
Oh yeah,
where Seoblum's come out. And yeah, he's managed to hold on to P3 with Dahlgren in P4.
An amazing jump there, because I think, you know, we saw Dahlgren and Gixxer sort of Godzilla fighting for the 2-3-4 battle, and now Howell and Schablum have really pulled it out the bag, and with Schablum 2 seconds behind Howell now, he could possibly start looking forwards, but Dahlgren 7 seconds behind that Lexus. Whether he'll catch him by the end of the race, we'll see. We know Dahlgren has the pace in that car to be catching him. He caught Gixxer, you know, with 9 seconds back. So whether he can do the same again, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, it just proves how much battling someone can actually hinder you. Because I mean, we had Dahlgren, Gixxer, and Godzilla. They've been fighting the whole time effectively. Whereas Howell and Sjöblom, they just kind of got on with it and pitted early, and then pitted very late, and were just kind of left to themselves to just set lap after lap after lap.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good news for them. But what's not so good news for Howell is Sjöblom is still within striking distance, and if he gets a move on, especially if Howell makes a mistake, which I'm not putting the commentator's curse out there, but it could happen.
I don't know. Howell's looked pretty consistent in that Audi, you know. As long as he doesn't get tripped up by back markers, I think he can do it. I think he can hang on to that P2 and keep the man in the Lexus behind. But obviously, no chance at the moment of P1. Camletto, I think, was about a 30-second lead last we checked. So yeah, he's long gone. I mean, it would take a big mistake from Camletto or getting caught up in an incident for that to change at this point in time. But still 7 minutes to go, and you know, anything can happen, as we've seen in some of the races previously. But yeah, we're back on board with Nate Newcomer in that Porsche, and Isaac, who is close behind in the Mercedes. You know, two very different cars battling on track, and that's what we like to see. And Newcomer's definitely been jumping around, as you said, between the manufacturers. So it seems like Nate Newcomer is able to jump in many of the different chassis and just extract a decent time or decent performance out of it. So yeah, good to see him really like succeeding, being in that top 10, and being able to push these chassis to what they can achieve.
100p's, James, or indubitably to change everything up a little bit. But yeah, we were seeing just then Alex Smith getting lapped a little bit. That's going to put a real bee in his bonnet. But now Roberts caught up to FX UK. So it's now a three-way battle back there for P13 between FX UK, Robert, and Simcox. And of course, that's not a lucky. That's a very unlucky position to be fighting for if you're superstitious.
Yeah, exactly. He's got the two Lamborghinis behind him, and obviously FX in the Aston. Be interesting to see if they can make that move, or whether the Lambos will start fighting amongst themselves and start making mistakes. But Simcox dropped back to a second now behind FX, and maybe those Lamborghinis have decided to battle. Shame you can jump on board, but yeah, great to see some battles up and down the field. But shame to see, as we see P20 and P21, they've decided they've had enough and maybe retired from the race. So lots of different stories throughout the field, but all seems to be relatively good racing throughout.
100p's, James. It is getting a bit spicy, especially with Robert and Simcox. They keep trading positions for me on my little live Delta screen that I get to see. And yeah, they're just battling all the way through. And yeah, Simcox is now behind Robert, as it was, but I think Simcox managed to sneak a nose in front of Robert. But of course, that's given FX a little bit of breathing room, as we can see. It's now 0.6 second gap. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if something a bit more spicy comes up. And yeah, it's just so much. Yeah,
there's quite a bit going on, and obviously these guys are just going to at this stage, especially the top 10 guys, have just not got to make a mistake, because that's the only thing really that's going to determine that top 10 finishing order. I mean, Gixxer is within a second of Dahlgren now, so he's sort of pushed on, caught up another second, but with 4 minutes to go, that's probably about two to three laps round here. I mean, it's going to be tough, especially on Dahlgren. I know he can definitely hold his own and keep people behind. So Gixxer's going to have to pull his finger out if he really wants to get past. So we're on board with the Gixxer now. Actually, I think it's a lap car. Possibly that might actually be FX UK behind. Yes, I think it is, because it's a Lamborghini of of Simcox behind him. So obviously gets lapped those cars, but doesn't seem to be holding them up, which is good for FXUK, but not great for Simcox, who wants the Gixxer to hold them up. So yeah, lots of different battles and lots of different cars involved, even lap cars. So definitely going to make it interesting in these closing stages. But as we say, Camaletto really just run away with this race from the start. I mean, he pulled a 12-second gap, 13-second gap before the pit stop, I believe, and then from there it's just grown and grown and grown. So yeah, seems pretty comfortable in that P1 position. It just has to hold it down for another 3 more minutes.
Well, someone who's going to have it's going to feel like a long 3 minutes for Newcomer and Godzilla, because Newcomer is currently 0.145 seconds behind Godzilla or Kai Banks, depends on which alias you know him as. But those two, they've been battling the whole race, James. They've been going through it non-stop, pretty much nose to tail the entire way round. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. Hopefully there's no incidents, hopefully there's no cock-ups between the two, but I'm looking at it right now and there's no splitting those two. They're staying about between 0.1 seconds and 0.4 seconds all the way through.
I think that Porsche is probably going to have to get it done in the corners somewhere, because obviously we know the Nissan on the straights is just going to fly. So once those turbos kick in, so I'm sure Newcomer's going to be looking for a place to overtake, possibly under the brakes into Boulderberg or Jackie X last corner, possibly the last sort of chicane. I think those are probably strong places to make a pass for the Porsche, but we'll see. I mean, Newcomer seems quite comfortable in that chassis, just needs to get it done.
Well, it looks like there's going to be 2 more laps left with Jack Camaletto now going round. Just try to track him now. That looks like he's going through the Kleiner chicane as we see him now. And yeah, he's got this and then 1 more lap and then P1's his, as long as he doesn't cock it up or anything. It's literally just self-preservation for him. We can see how far Alistair Howell is behind him. I mean, Alistair Howell only going through T2 when Camaletto was basically heading up towards the Villeneuve chicane. So that's a phenomenal job and pace from Camaletto. But I think someone who's going to be asking what if is Alex Smith, who's currently dead last out of the cars that are still running.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate for Alex. I mean, obviously he came into the race P1, has been caught up in a few different incidents on track and dropped down to P19, whether that's a bit of commentator's curse or just getting himself worked up that knowing he was the fastest and didn't really come off on track. And Camaletto, without Alex there, has just managed to drive away. And at this point in time, if I was Camaletto, you just need to do some parade laps at this stage, you know, just back it off, cruise round, nothing to prove, start waving the hand at the crowd and just accept that P1's yours, really. That's all you need to do, and I'm sure Alex Smith will be, you know, sucking through his teeth, though, thinking that should have been his.
Well, I think Camaletto and Alex Smith, they'll be cracking into the whiskey tonight, but for completely different reasons. Camaletto enjoying, savouring, Alex, you know, well, he's probably perched right next to the toilet in preparation for what will happen in 2 or 3 hours' time. But yeah, it's been fantastic racing so far. Alistair Howell on his final lap now as he goes round Canal Bocht, heading up to Lucien Bianchi Bocht. And yeah, Godzilla still fighting, trying to catch up to Newcomer.
Overtaking Godzilla on the timing screen. So
yeah, it looks like Godzilla's just trying to catch up, but
yeah,
that's a hefty gap. I wonder if he made a whoopsie somewhere.
Possibly. I mean, you know, as we said earlier, it looks like he just did a splash and dash. Those tyres may have just be on their last legs, and Nate Newcomer, as we know, the Porsche seems to be quite soft on its tyres and be able to drag those out. Possibly been easier for him to make the move in that situation, especially coming into these closing stages. So that Porsche, you know, he's managed to drag that up to P6, which is a great job around this circuit.
Yeah, it's just one of those things for these guys, and yeah, it's literally just bring it home now. There's not too many people who are within striking distance of each other. Mertens could have another crack at Kaneko if he goes for a very late dive or some. Yeah, that looks like he's gone for a late dive there. As we see on the timing screens, 0.05 seconds between Mertens and Kaneko for the P16 position. on their very final lap. But that is Camaletto now across the line in P1, Howell in P2, Sjöblom in P3, Dahlgren P4. We've got Gixxer crossing the line in P5. So you see Howell parking up on the side there, hopefully not wanting to, get hit by anyone finishing it. Because, James, what I like to do after a race, I like to rally everyone I can see. But Nate Newcomer crossing line in P6. That looks like it's job done for him. Godzilla in P7. Just waiting now for Isaacs to cross the line, hopefully in P8 if he's not messed up anywhere. But otherwise, that'll be Maddow in P9 with Nielsen in P10. So that'll be the top 10. And yeah, James, I was talking about the whiskey for Alex.
Yeah,
he's already gone.
Yeah, he's gonna need it. He's had a shocker of a race there, and it's very unfortunate because we knew he had the pace in him, but it just didn't come to him really. But we did see Mertens make that move on Kaneko at the end, so he got that done and overtook the Lamborghini. But Dakusa in the chat's asking where did Howell start? He said crazy well done with the strategy. That's a good point actually. Where did Howell qualify? Do you happen to have that?
I do happen to have it, and I can tell you now. So, hang on, let me just load everything up. So in P1 we had Camaletto. This is the race results. In P1 we had Camaletto, P2 Howell, P3 we had Sjöblom with Dahlgren in P4. Gixxer finished in P5 in that Lexus. I told you if Lexus would do well around here, and now in P3 and P5. In P6 we had Nate Newcomer in the Porsche, Kai Banks or Godzilla, depending on who you ask. Eighth we had RWB Isaacs. In P9 we had Mad Al, who he kind of came out of nowhere for me. He kind of just turned up in P9. Brilliant stuff for him. And to round off in P10 we have Casper Nielsen in that Nissan. But in terms of qualifying, we had Alex Smith on pole position. He had the absolute worst race in history for him. Just
it was very unfortunate.
In P2 on qualifying, we had Jack Camaletto, who was 3,000ths off Alex Smith. So I think Camaletto, he had the pace from the get-go and just got all the way around. In P3, we had RWB Isaacs with Gixxer in P4, and there were 200ths between those two. We had Alistair Howell in P5, so that was a fantastic job for him to go from P5 to P2. Goat Friend was in P6, Dahlgren in P7, Mike Bull in P8, Kai Banks in P9, and RWB Alwyn rounding off the top 10 in qualifying. So, to be honest, Sjöblom did absolutely fantastic job because he was outside the top 10.
Do you know where he qualified?
Well, James, you're asking a very, very hard question there.
Very hard question. It's okay, but obviously outside the top 10 to come P3 in that race in the Lexus as well. That's a great effort. And same with Howell as well to go from P5 to P2. Shame, obviously Alex Smith couldn't be there at the front. We knew he had the pace and was him and Camaletto were 3,000ths apart, so it would have been good to see them battle on track. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be, and Camaletto came out on top. So great racing. And I'm sure we'll see that throughout the rest of the season when they switch to the GT4 spec cars in the future. Yeah,
definitely. So if you guys want to check out next week's race I don't even know where we're at next week, James.
Suzuka, possibly.
That sounds about right, to be honest. Yeah, I'm going to go along with it.
Race app, it looks like it's Suzuka.
So yeah, Suzuka, phenomenal stuff. Looking forward to that, especially in the GT4s where it's a lot more closer racing, in my opinion, and a lot more contact. So, well, rubbing's racing, James. So it is what it is.
It is.
But again, fantastic stuff. We hope you enjoyed tonight's racing and the commentary. We apologise again for the cameras being a little bit out of sorts, but we are working on it. It is slowly improving over time as I try to get to grips with this auto director. Any last words, James?
No, I just to say that the guys did a great job tonight, and Camaletto just really showed that he was the dominant driver, and it's great to see, and Zolder produced some great racing. So great all round, and look forward to the next round.
Yeah, so thanks for joining, guys. Hope to see you around next time. Tuesday, Constructors Championship for the final round of that, and next week. Next Saturday, that's on to GT4s. So Thanks for joining us. If you want to join RWB, the Discord link's on the screen now, so join that and you can hop along with us. And yeah, make sure you subscribe so you get notifications for the next time we commentate races and stuff. But yeah, I'll stop rambling on. Remember, don't race alone, race RWB.